worship leader, worship pastor, worship arts, music minister, music director. There seems to be an endless way to describe the person who's chosen to lead a group of people into a time of praising and worshiping God. See, throughout the Bible, we see many references to musical worship. In Psalm 95, Scripture says, "Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation." Ephesians 5:19, "Speak to one another with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. Sing and make music in your heart to the Lord." And again in Colossians 3:16, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom, and as you sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts to God." I could go on, but worship is not simply about music. In Romans 12:1, we are told that our greatest act of worship is to offer ourselves to God as living sacrifices. This means that worship is not constrained to a single Sunday morning event. Rather, our very breath, thought, and action serve as worship to the one who created us, laid down his life for us. This means that choosing to lead a worship ministry begins with choosing to live a life of worship. Musical talent is important. Leadership skills are important. But music is only transformed into a worship ministry when it is inspiring and leading the congregation to develop a lifestyle of worship that extends outside the church walls. My journey into worship ministry began in 2005. When I joined my church's youth worship band, I had the opportunity to be mentored by the two worship leaders in my church who recognized the calling God had for my life. In 2007, I began studying at Montreat College in Western North Carolina. At Montreat, I had the opportunity to major in worship arts, train in vocal and piano performance, and also minor in Bible and religious studies. While at Montreat College, I became involved in the chapel band and eventually was established as a campus worship leader. I had many wonderful opportunities, including organizing nights of worship for our campus and leading fundraising concerts for international missions. In 2009, I joined a local church as the intern of the music ministry and helped to establish a college-age worship band for that church. My first full-time ministry as a worship leader began after graduation in 2011 when I joined an inner-city church plant in Asheville, North Carolina, where I developed the music ministry and served for 3.5 years. As I continue to follow God's direction in this journey, I've identified some foundational beliefs that I hold in regards to worship ministry and leadership. I believe worship leadership can be broken down into 3 main areas of importance: music, discipleship, and theology. Music. A worship leader should be able to demonstrate musical excellence and the ability to use those skills to help encourage and train volunteers. A good worship leader knows how to bring out the best in his or her volunteers and help them reach their own goals as musicians. Discipleship. Growth of a music ministry relies on the spiritual health and growth of its members. A worship leader must be willing to be a spiritual leader and pastor to his or her volunteers. I believe in living life together, sharing our joys and our sorrows. I'm very intentional about building a family-like atmosphere within the music ministry. And lastly, theology. A worship leader must have a solid spiritual and theological foundation. The development of a healthy worship culture is built upon the anatomy of Scripture, and music selection must be guided by the influence of sound theology. As a leader in worship ministry, I am committed to a lifetime of learning and continued growth in these 3 areas. As a musician, I am dedicated to continual practice. I'm constantly pushing myself to become better in my craft. In this way, I'm offering my first fruits to God and am able to use my skills to help my volunteers improve as well. As a spiritual leader, I am committed to nurturing my personal relationship with God, being pastor first in my family to my wife and son, and then to the others placed in my care through music ministry. And finally, in theology, I am committed to the study of Scripture and identifying books and other resources which inform my theological understanding. I believe it is crucial to understand that worship and service go hand in hand. When we worship God, we are recognizing His greatness, His immeasurable love and grace for us. This should inspire us to extend that love and grace to others through service. Being a worship leader requires humility. It requires that the worship leader be more interested in a platform of service than the spotlight. This protects both the worship leader and the congregation from a shift of focus onto self-praise rather than God praise. Corporate worship may begin with our gatherings, but it continues through God's glory overflowing out of them and spilling into the community, bringing light and hope. Thank you for allowing me to share a bit of my personal journey into worship ministry and some of the beliefs and thoughts I've developed along the way. This journey is ever-changing as God continues to mold and refine me into the worship leader He desires me to be. One of my greatest joys is using my gifts to help lead God's people into deeper, more intimate relationship with Him through worship. I hope you enjoyed this video. God bless.